Good morning. Wow. Lent, fifth Sunday of Lent already. I was just thinking about Lent, and sometimes I think we go into Lent and we say, gotta gear up and I gotta pull through and I'm giving this up and I think I can make it to Easter. There's this kind of intensity sometimes that's on us, and then when Easter arrives, we just let everything go, and it's kind of, but I think I'm starting to look at Lent a little differently. And Lent, there's a beauty, there's joy in the desert, true joy in the desert, because when we go to the desert, we leave everything else behind, our cares, our worries, our concerns, even some of our pleasures that remind us of what it really feels great about being a human being. We leave all that stuff away and we set ourselves up to be with God alone. God alone. That's the motto over the Trappist monastery in Bardstown, Kentucky. You go up and at the gate and it says, God alone. Yeah, great. I really struggled with this gospel some this week, and of course this week Father Brian and I see that Claire and Ian are here today too. We were out at the Camp de Sales for the Lumen Christi Kairos retreat, and the Greeks came and they said, we want to see Jesus. Well, I'll tell you what, we did see Jesus, and he manifested himself with great grace and with healing in so many ways among those students. In doing the morning meditations each day, I would look and I would just look into their souls as their eyes would open up, and you could see the hunger and the love that they were just reaching for Jesus. Oh, that was so good, so good. What a privilege to be there for that encounter. But I'll tell you what, it's great to be back. It's really, really good to be here today. Today's gospel, chapter 12 of John, comes right from chapter 12. And this is a very important point in the life of Jesus. This is a pivotal point. Up until this time, Jesus, his hour had not come. It wasn't time for him. What does that mean? It means that at the wedding of Cana, Jesus asked Mary, well, my time has not yet come. When he would speak and heal, and the Pharisees would gang up on him and want to drag him off and stone him to death, he would slip through the crowds, and the author would put, because his hour had not yet come. The hour has come at this point. This is the watershed of the Gospel of John. This point, Jesus, instead of giving his life and ministry and service and healing and deliverance to the world and ministry, he sets his face like a flint for Jerusalem. Code, Jerusalem. Suffering, mocking, scourging, and eventually being crucified for us. He sets his face like a flint for Jerusalem because that was the reason that he came. The Father sent Jesus into this world for that very purpose, to live his life for us, and yet to give his life on our behalf for the salvation of the world. The core verse here, I just honed in on, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it, and whoever hates his life in this world will preserve it for eternal life. Now, Jesus, of course, is that grain. And falling into the ground and dying is his crucifixion. And bearing much fruit is the salvation of the world. The reason that we're even here today is because Jesus gave his life for us. He fell into the ground in death for us. And then he adds another little, one of his paradoxes. You know, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first, and he who humbles himself shall be exalted, and he who exalts himself shall be humbled. And these things that we try to get our hands on, or wrap our mind around. But he says, if you love your life, you will lose it. If you hate your life in this world, you will gain it for eternal life. And of course, he's not speaking about the genuine, honest love that we must respect our body, our whole life with, that God himself expects from us, in the same kind of love that we would give to another child of God. He's not speaking about that kind of loving of our lives, if you will. He's speaking about a love that's a disordered kind of thing, where we preserve ourselves, we turn inward, we are self-centered, and we carve out our own little turf and our life on our own. He's talking about that kind of distorted love, which manifests itself in the fruits of the flesh in various degrees. And in the end, that's true death. When I taught theology of the body out at Lumen, we drew heavily upon love and responsibility, the great work of John Paul II, which led to the fruition of the theology of the body itself, that work. But the foundational principles for theology of the body are found in that great work. And he does great essays on love, what is love, and he has an essay on lust in there. And I would explain that what we have is this another watershed of our lives. Are we going to live our lives according to love, which is willing the good of the other, giving of ourselves, serving? Or are we going to live our lives according to the principle of lust? I'm going to get what I can get, all the gusto in this world, and I'm going to carve out what my pleasures and my desires wish to achieve in this world. Now, I wish it was simple. I wish it was something we could say, well, hey, I'm just going to choose that and we're done with it. But I don't think it works that way. I just don't think it works that way, because I still wrestle with this complete giving and total surrender to Jesus Christ. We have that decision to make every day. Am I going to live this day in the sacrifice of my life for the good of others? I've said this before, and I can say it again. I live with a person that does that every day for me. And I wish, I hope that I can attain that and go and keep going with that. But last week, Father Brian's homily was wonderful. He explained to us and reminded us that the joy the Lord desires for us is found in surrender. In surrender. And today, this gospel calls us and is calling us that we must be willing to fall into the earth and die to bear much fruit. Let us not be afraid of losing our lives. Let us not be afraid of giving ourselves fully to Jesus. What are we going to lose if we do that? Some bad habits? Some fruits of the flesh? Selfishness? Anxiety, maybe? What are we going to gain if we do that? A whole new way of looking at life through the eyes of Jesus, his love, his gift. Ignatius of Antioch, one of the great patristic fathers, suffered a martyr's death, and he gave us an example. And he cried out as he died, I am God's grain. I am God's grain. Alluding, of course, to this very passage that we read in our gospel today. So we can hold on to our lives. We can carve out our place, if you will. Something like the guy in the parable of the talents. And I say, don't be that guy, The one that was given one, he just held on to it out of fear and insecurity. He buried it. Didn't do anything with it. It didn't become fruitful or productive. We can hold on to our lives, or we can let go and surrender to the adventure and the joy of following Jesus with our whole hearts. Why? So that we may become God's grain for the life of the world. In our baptism, we die, and Christ lives in us. He gives us the gift of his own very life. And as St. Paul said, it is not I that live, but Christ who lives in me. Let us live our lives for the life of the world.